I was told that it would be a routine procedure. The doctor made it seem like I would be in and out. But oh, he could not be more wrong about the assessment of my current predicament. Why was this doctor so horribly and terribly incorrect about the simplicity of cutting out my appendix? The answer is simple. I am now witnessing said doctor and a gaggle of nurses struggling to resuscitate my seizing and cut open body. I couldn't bear to look at my organs and other slimy innards, nor watch the final death throes of my soon-to-be corpse. So I walked, or rather seeped through the exit door to the surgery room and looked down at my hands. My dark skin was now translucent, yet there were no bones, just the outline of my form. I shook my head, trying to not think about my surely expired body in the other room, and walked outside to clear my head. I don't recall how long I stood outside in the parking lot underneath one of the lights. All I know is that I could not feel the rain as it fell onto the pavement beneath me. As a matter of fact, I could not feel anything. Not the ground, the rocks, random strips of grass that burst out from the concrete. Nothing. Actually, that is a lie. I could feel my own ethereal form with my hands, but everything else seemed to phase right through me. Which means I wasn't walking around per se, just lightly gliding along, as that was the closest to walking as I could get. Truth be told, I have yet to get a hang of the whole being a ghost thing. Most disappointing was that I do not even remember dying. The doctors put me under, and the next thing I knew, I was watching them freak out at my sudden death. And seeing no angels or demons? Heck, not even a bright light came from anywhere. I suppose that means I'm stuck like this forever now. After a few hours filled with existential dread had passed, I decided to make use of my new ghostly body. And what better way to do that than scaring the soul out of some unfortunate person, just like in the movies. I did not have to wait long for a potential victim, as the man of the hour himself appeared, the doctor who failed to perform my surgery correctly and let me die. I'd be lying if I said I did not bear any malicious feelings towards the man, which is why I waited until he made it to his expensive-looking luxury car and shimmied my way into the passenger seat next to him. The poor bespectacled man looked like he had aged decades and looked incredibly disheveled. His face was stained with sweat, and droplets of most likely my blood was splattered against his white doctor's coat. I almost felt bad for what I had planned to do next to him. Almost. I waited until he started his car before extending my hand out and mentally channeled a command to turn off the engine. Bewildered, he turned the engine key again, and again I turned it off. He grumbled a few choice swear words and slammed his fist into the steering wheel. That was a great warm-up, but now it was time to get serious. I closed my eyes, put my hands together, and summoned up what I believed to be an arcane power. The temperature in his car dropped to below freezing. Ice filled any and all orifices. I gritted my teeth and then forced both of the car doors to lock. I opened my eyes to see the doctor shivering and thrashing his body against the car door, screaming for help. The sight of his panic face and pleas for safety was almost too much for me not to laugh at. It began as a light chuckle, then short spurts of laughter before finally guffawing loudly. The doctor looked around wildly in his car. Apparently my voice could be heard if I put enough emotion into it. Even so, I felt like this was not enough. I needed to punish this man more for what he did to me. I then channeled deep and malevolent darkness from the core of my being and allowed it to surge into my left hand. My once translucent hand was now a charcoal black, and wisps of black mist flowed off of it. Without any remorse, I shoved that same hand into the chest of the unsuspecting doctor. I'll be honest in saying, I did not know what would happen when I did that, but I must say that results were extremely satisfying. From the point of entry, black rivers of corruption surged through his skin. His mouth opened in pain, but no sound escaped his throat. I willed more of my malicious toxin to spread into his body, and my laughter became deeper and much more demonic. I watched as he pounded his chest, trying to make the agony end, but of course, it failed. He then tore off his coat and collared shirt, and his eyes widened in alarm. My ghostly poison had spread across the entirety of his abdomen and was burning his skin. I, on the other hand, was feeling elated with my actions. That is, until he began to pray. He did not get farther than Hail Mary before my hand was forcefully ejected from his body and summarily from his vehicle. It was only then that my reason had been restored, and I realized what it was that I was doing. I had just tried to murder the man who botched my surgery and was absolutely thrilled while doing so. And that fact scared me. It was like I was unable to pause my actions once I had started. There was some sort of pull to committing atrocious deeds that came from the seed of evil within me. Now aware of this fact, I turned my back to the confused and frightened doctor and flew off into the nearby woods near the hospital to think. I found a nice stream that tunneled its way between two decently sized boulders. I laid down, or more accurately, pretended to lay across them in order to feel human again, to feel alive again. Thankfully, I was able to calm down and fully process what had just occurred. I pondered why this urge inside of myself felt compelled to inflict harm on the living, but only when they were around me, as now I do not feel the pull to do so at all. Unbeknownst to me, a couple of drunk homeless men had wandered their way over to the stream and were sloppily lapping up water. They were only a mere 10 feet away from me in the blackness of the night, allowing me to make out their mismatched clothing, and unfortunately, that deep-seated wickedness inside me sprouted back up to the surface. Without my knowledge, my left hand was now that ruinous black, desperate to weed its way into the bodies of others. I did my best to resist these bestial urges by holding my left arm's wrist and focusing my hardest to prevent those evil intentions from running wild. It was all in vain as a maniacal smile crept onto my face. The temptation to harass and potentially conduct villainous acts onto these men was just too strong, and I snapped. They had just finished drinking their fill of forest water and were walking away when I had forced my hands into their backs. I was not sure how I knew, but I could tell that my hands were penetrating each of their hearts. Their bodies stiffened up and their jaws slacked as they shouted into the night air. I directed the sludge from my body to settle within their hearts until it began to pump through their bodies. I then yanked my hands out of them and watched as they fell to the ground and writhed in pain, clutching their chests. I did not know what would become of them, but I felt fantastic. I was unable to feel the physical world, but these sensations were able to fill the hungry void within my soul. I needed to feel it more. I needed to experience these impious, sinful sensations again. They were all that I was able to detect with my ethereal body. I could not quite articulate what was happening to me. All I knew was that there was a hospital full of potential victims for me to feed off of. Finally, I released all of my mental restraints and darted towards the hospital, phasing into the dimly lit entryway. I flashed towards the nearest patient room and saw a young boy struggling to breathe in his sleep. Wanting to savor the moment, I slowly glided over to the child and forced the temperature down to a comfortable near freezing. The boy awoke with a gasp and pulled as much of his blankets around himself in a makeshift cocoon. I floated above him and tapped an inky black finger to the center of his forehead. But unlike the other victims of the night, my corruption could not penetrate his skin, nor could he hear my complaints at my failure. I tried again by trying to force both of my hands into his chest, but there was some sort of barrier preventing me from doing so. Frustrated and confused, I let the temperature go back to normal and floated out of the room, and instead of being greeted by an empty hallway, a winged woman dressed in a dazzling white robe appeared before me. Her hair was a flaming bob cut, and she carried a sword that was almost comical in size. Pure righteous hatred filled her gaze as she effortlessly pointed her sword at me. Of course, I knew exactly what she came here for. She wanted to stop me from feeling. She wants to prevent me from experiencing the only sensations I could perceive, and I was not about to allow her to take them from me. I opened my mouth and felt my now elongated tongue drop to my chest and felt my teeth become razor sharp. The angel frowned in disgust at my changing appearance, and then her face changed. Her eyes were wet, and her lip quivered as though she pitied me. How dare she mock me? I lunged at her, aiming for her throat, and with a flick of the wrist with closed eyes, she swung her divine sword and cut me in half, forcing me to black out. I woke with a start in a hospital bed, alone and with a scarred stomach. I looked at the clock, and only a few hours had passed since I came in for the surgery. Utterly confused, I pressed the call nurse button, and a few moments later, a tired-faced nurse walked into the room, asking what I needed. I hesitantly asked her if I had died. She looked at me like I was the dumbest person on earth and muttered that I would be cut off from my current pain medications if I continued to talk like that, and left the room. All I could do was lie back against my pillow and breathe a sigh of relief. It was nothing more than a horrid nightmare. In a dim-lit room, a man was writing down his report on the most recent death experiment. He noted that the subject had quickly become malicious and attacked any human he came in contact with. It was determined that due to the lack of any outside stimuli, the subject resorted to violence to experience what they lost while they were alive. However, it is unknown as to why they were forced back into their bodies. What was promising, however, was that prayer seemed to force the subject into a docile state, and children were resistant to the subject's attacks. He then concluded his report by stating the next experiments will be dedicated to analyzing that in a more controlled environment. It was time for Phase 2 to begin.